listening to the ESP, the European Skeptics Podcast, an independent weekly show set out to bring you news, interesting topics, and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 529. I'm your host, András Pinter, and joining me for the show is my co-host, Pontus Böckman. See ya!
Hejsan András! Back home, I see. Back home,
only for a couple of days, then headed to Italy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Watch out for measles.
Oh, will do.
Okay. Have you had measles?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
but I'm vaccinated.
You're vaccinated.
I got my childhood jab. It was, even when I was a child, it was already compulsory.
Of course, I'm ancient, so I think I had it when I was very young. I don't know.
Did?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I had all of them. I had the whole shebang.
Oh, I did have chickenpox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did that one.
And mumps, I think, yes. Yeah. Measles.
Measles, yeah. More about measles later in the show.
Yeah.
But, speaking of happier things, the European Skeptics Congress, Liverpool 2026, tickets are going live on 6th of May. This will be at, for most of you, if you are European CET listeners, this will be 11 a.m. If you're in the UK, it will be 10 a.m. And you should probably, especially if you want to have a chance for those very fancy gala dinner tickets, you should really be alert. They can run out very, very, very quickly. I'm talking about minutes if you not have your finger on the trigger. So, of course, we're looking forward to that very much. There will be, on the 6th as well, at the same time, there will be the announcement of the first couple of speakers. So program is taking shape. Can't say anything yet, but on the 6th you will know.
That sounds really exciting. I can't wait to see all that.
Yeah, and we should repeat the dates as well. They are 16th to 18th of October. The Liner Hotel in Liverpool.
Yeah, I would say mark your calendars, but don't just do that. Book your tickets and book your accommodation as well. That's a smart move. Alongside your plane tickets, if you're coming from outside the UK. That is my suggestion. Speaking of the UK, and I don't mean to bring down the mood in any way, because what I'd like to mention here is both a piece of sad news, but also, I believe, living up to the age of 98 is pretty good. So, well done. And I'd like to commemorate here Desmond Morris. Does the name sound familiar to you?
No, it does not. But I saw it in the... I looked it up, and then that's the guy. Okay, but please tell us.
So, if someone doesn't know, he was a zoologist, an author, and a broadcaster, and he passed away not even 2 weeks ago. The most important work of his that he gained fame with was his 1967 book, The Naked Ape. And obviously, I didn't read it in the first edition. I wasn't born then. But in my 20s, I read that book, both in English and in Hungarian, in a Hungarian translation. And it fascinated me, blew my mind. So basically what he did was he explored human behavior through an evolutionary lens. So as a zoologist, he treated the human species as such. And his career spanned over 60 years, and he authored more than 50 books. So if you're a dog owner, a cat owner, or a horse owner, you'll probably be familiar with his works as well as an ethologist. He really engaged in licensing people about ethological stuff going on with these different species. And the human species was no exception. But obviously, that came with a huge backlash. Many people found that outrageously heretic to just treat the human species as one of the animal kingdom. But afterwards, he rewrote it, he reworked it to a certain extent, and that was The Human Animal. That was his second big thing. But he was also a broadcaster. People Watching and Body Watching were very famous works of his. And not many people know about him that he was an avid painter as well. So he was an artist as well, not only a scientist. And lived up to the age of 98. That is pretty phenomenal. I think that deserves a mention as well. So
yeah. So please explain, what is people watching? That sounds creepy. Was he a peeping Tom?
No, People Watching was a TV program that was about elements of human behavior being explained in zoological terms. And that is a fascinating program. It's still available on some TV channels, I think.
Okay.
And I'm very happy that the American Skeptic magazine, published a very, very nice obituary. Mm-hmm. He consistently sought naturalistic, evidence-based explanations for human behavior. So that is why he's very interesting and very close to our hearts as skeptics. Even though he was dealing a lot with human behavior, he challenged the anthropocentric and purely cultural interpretations, but really popularized scientific thinking. It doesn't necessarily mean that he was right about everything. So he got a lot of criticism for his often very far-fetched ideas and theories, but it was still fascinating. He really challenged the existing view of how to approach human behavior. So that was great.
Okay, great. Yeah, speaking of human behavior, we interviewed Kat Ford 2 episodes ago on 5/27. Yes, and the preprint of her article is now available online. So we will link to that if you're interested. It has the title, Belonging Among the Spiritual but Not Religious. And then the subtitle is quite lengthy. It says, Belonging as a valued and sought-after affective state for spiritual but not religious residents of Glastonbury, UK. End quote. So that's a bit of a mouthful. And Kat has this caveat saying, please, she says, tell your listeners that it's just a preprint. So it hasn't been through peer review yet. So it might get absolutely savaged and may need to change a lot. End quote from Kat there. So we will see. But anyway, we will link to it if you're interested.
Well, modesty is a very important characteristic when it comes to scientific publishing. So I think Kat really nailed that one. If you haven't listened to the interview that we had with Kat, please go back 2 episodes and enjoy it. It was really cool. All right. This episode will not be an interview episode, but a regular one. So that means that we are starting the regular segment with TWISH, also known as This Week in Skeptical History. Today, we're traveling back to the 17th century, 1667 specifically, when our hero of this week, we don't know when he was born, but we know that he was baptized on the 29th of April, which happened to fall onto this week. And his name was John. Okay, so I'm going to need our Scottish listeners to correct me on the pronunciation. I'm not going to mention where he was born, because then I would be way out of my depth. But if I pronounce the surname wrongly, I'm pretty sure about the first name, John Arbuthnot. If I butchered that, give me a shout.
John Arbuthnot. Okay. Yes.
Arbuthnot. Yeah. All right. So he was a Scottish physician, a satirist, and a polymath, basically. And he's most known for his contributions to mathematics and statistical analysis.
Yeah.
But he's also, as a satirist, he was a member of the Scriblerus Club. I don't know how familiar our listeners are with that one. It's based on a fictional character, Martinus Scriblerus, and through his words, there are several weird things explained by a group of scholars, actually. And he's also credited with inventing the figure of John Bull, which is basically just like a characterization of the generic Brit. So that is not necessarily the most beloved thing about his work. But if you've ever used the term John Bull to describe a typical Englishman, or if you've ever looked at a set of data and wondered if the results were just a fluke, you have him to thank for that, John Arbuthnot. So he was born in Scotland in 1667, most likely, and his training was at the beginning in mathematics. But then, after his father had an issue with the church for political reasons, he had to leave and he went to London. But first, he enrolled on a doctoral course in medicine at the University of St. Andrews, where he was a bit of a prodigy. He almost immediately got a doctorate there. So he was like a genius. And later on, he became the personal physician to Queen Anne, which really opened the doors to high society for him. But his most vital work happened away from the bedside. So back in 1692, so he was only 25 years of age, he translated a very important work of Christian Huygens.
Huygens!
Yes. And that became the first work published in English on statistical probability.
Oh, what are the odds?
Budumts. So he didn't just translate the math and the original work, he also applied it to the real world of his day. And he published a landmark paper for the Royal Society where he analysed 80 years of birth records in London, and he noticed a persistent slight excess of male birth over female birth. He concluded that this was a pattern too consistent to be mere chance. A little bit of a fluke in this is that he attributed this to divine providence. It was his words, but he actually had performed the first formal statistical test of significance back in the late 17th century. So he was pioneering the very tools skeptics use today to debunk claims of paranormal phenomena or miraculous clusters of data, the ability to mathematically distinguish a real pattern from random noise. He knew exactly that the logic alone rarely wins an argument, so to fight the nonsense of his day, he turned to a sharper weapon, which was ridicule. So alongside his friends Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope, Arbuthnot founded the Scriblerus Club. Together, they created a fictional character named Martinus Scriblerus, a man who believed every pseudoscientific theory and pedantic absurdity he came across. So they used him, this character, as conveyor of clear ideas and criticism of nonsense. So through Scriblerus, Arbuthnot took aim at the abuses of human learning. He didn't just call out bad ideas, he made them look ridiculous. He wrote a scathing satire on the art of political lying, for example, where he was asking a question that still haunts us today, which is whether a lie is best contradicted by the truth or by another even bigger lie. Unfortunately, some politicians of this day tend to lean towards the latter, right? But we as skeptics, we prefer the former. Let's try to contradict lies by the truth, if possible.
Yeah, we're odd that way.
Yeah. Yeah, so he also criticized a couple of religiously leaning ideas. Probably his greatest skeptical contribution was his 1695 critique of Dr. William Woodward's Natural History of the Earth, because Woodward claimed he would explain the biblical flood using geology. Arbuthnot, ever the skeptic, of course, took the claims apart piece by piece, showing they were inconsistent with physical evidence. He was an early champion of the idea that if you make a grand claim about how the world works, you'd better have the data to back it up. So I think he could be described as a man who could animate his massive knowledge by a bright and active imagination, but remaining a role model for skeptics, a man who used math to understand the world and a bit of wit to protect it from the pedantry of those who would claim to know more than they can prove. He died in 1735, but not without leaving a mark on the world and definitely on statistics. And next time you see something portrayed as a statistically significant result or a perfectly aimed piece of satire, raise a glass to the doctor who taught us how to spot a fluke, how to laugh at a fraud. So, John Arbuthnot.
Yeah, sounds like an amazing guy.
Yeah, he probably was. Definitely at his humor. All right, but that brings us to the next part of the show, which is when we look around Europe and see what's new. let's stay in the UK, because we have a classic and frankly, stomach-turning case of a rogue medic preying on the vulnerable. What led to me investigating this a little further was one of Ed Ernst's reports, but it's in the BBC that the story of a former GP in Leicester, England, is reported, who has been permanently struck off the medical register after running an unlicensed dirty backstreet clinic where he promised to cure terminal cancer with garlic oil and vitamin C.
Classical quackery.
Yeah, quackery done by an actual medical doctor whose medical license had actually already been withdrawn back in 2015. His name is Dr. Mohsen Ali. He was found to be operating an unregistered clinic out of a residential house. And according to the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service, Ali targeted patients who had been told by the NHS that their conditions were terminal. So that is really the deepest of them all, right? So it's the lowest level.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to describe that. He reportedly charged these patients up to £15,000 for treatments that included intravenous garlic oil, vitamin C, and ozone therapy. And to make matters worse, the tribunal heard that Ali reused intravenous bags, exposing these already frail patients to a high risk of sepsis and infection.
Wow.
It's like a skeptic's bingo card, really. Ali used classic conspiratorial rhetoric to manipulate his victims in the first place. He told patients that the NHS was killing them and that Big Pharma was only interested in making money, while claiming his own methods had a 90% success rate.
Mm-hmm. And he charged a lot as well, right? It was
exactly
about money for him too.
Yeah, Big Pharma was interested in making money, yeah, but they can probably actually deliver on their promises when they do make some. One patient, though, a woman with terminal ovarian cancer, tragically passed away shortly after stopping her evidence-based treatment to pursue Ali's bogus cures. So that is a huge amount of responsibility to take. Well, he didn't recognize his responsibility, apparently. And when authorities raided the property that he used as a clinic, quote-unquote clinic, they described it as dirty, unhygienic, and visibly contaminated.
Visibly contaminated?
Visibly contaminated.
Wow.
So you have a mental picture of what it might have looked like.
I do now.
And it's really, oh my God. And while he did not attend the hearing and deny the allegations via email, the tribunal found his actions dishonest. Well, yes, duh. And reprehensible. So he has been officially struck off the medical register, ensuring he can no longer hide behind the title of doctor to sell garlic-flavored false hope. But he kept on going. So now he's officially reprehended again, but to what avail, we'll just have to see. However, this should be actually something that a court...
Yeah, he should go behind bars for this.
Yes.
If you can't stop him any other way.
Yeah, it's just, if you struck him off the register and he just keeps going, there's no point. And when he actually kills people, this should be taken to court, because that is more serious than just someone needs to be slowed down.
Yeah.
He needs to be stopped.
It's amazing how people can convince themselves that they are, because he may be convinced that he's doing something good. I don't know. You can't look into people's heads. But it reminds me of a story very quickly. A local guy here I may have mentioned this, but a couple of years ago, a local guy, he wasn't a doctor even. He made a concoction out of burnt wood and made his own kind of snake oil and sold it to people with terminal cancer. And when they got him, and he went to jail for this eventually, and when they interviewed him, they asked him, how did you think that this would work? Well, I tried it on my father when he was ill, so I know that it works. Okay, what happened to your father then? Well, he died.
Yeah, but he was terminal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what? Anyway, you never know. Maybe he was just looking for money. All right. Yeah. Time for our mandatory and customary measles report. We've always kept an extra eye on measles because it's It's so very contagious, as we know. It's the most sensitive to vaccination rates and vaccination hesitancy, so it's very susceptible for anti-vax rhetoric and stuff. And unfortunately, as always, we have bad news. Between 2023 and 2025, more than 35,000 cases of measles were recorded in the EU, and at least 30 deaths. So don't think that measles is benign. You can die from measles. Most cases hit infants that are too young to be vaccinated, and they are often infected by older unvaccinated children. So you can't vaccinate babies too early, right? So you rely on the older kids to be vaccinated. But if they're not, they're going to spread it to the youngest children. And as we found so many times before, Romania by far is the worst country. About 87% of all measles cases in the EU in 2024, when there was a big spike, were reported in Romania. Italy was big too. They had over 1,000 cases. After 2024, we've seen a big improvement when it comes to infection rates, but this is only temporary. We know this. A big spike like the one in 2024 is very likely just around the corner because vaccination rates are going down, not up. The uptake of the second dose at age 5 in Romania is just over 60% nationally. And is as low as 20% in some communities. This is according to the National Institute of Public Health in Romania. This should be compared with what we know is the recommended level of 95% to keep the disease under control. One problem in Romania is that under the current rules, only general practitioners are reimbursed by the state for administering vaccines. Other doctors must complete additional certification, often pay out of pocket for supplies. This can take months, so people are not, or these doctors are not so interested in doing this because it costs them a lot of money and sometimes it's hard to get the reimbursement from the government. And there is no real central program to drive vaccinations, a lot of bottlenecks and bureaucracy, and the state just relies on the efforts of general practitioners to promote vaccinations, and it's not really effective. Even when parents want to protect their children, it can be difficult to get it done. A lot of parents are also reluctant. There's a lot of rumors. Still, people think it's linked to autism, all of that old hat. Across Romania, there are closed online groups on social media that have become spaces where doubts are shared and amplified by mothers who are afraid of the MMR vaccine. And just to illustrate the negative trend there, the rate of people of all ages in Romania that have received 2 doses have gone from the already too low 76% in 2019 to 62% in 2024. So the trend is absolutely going the wrong way. And even if Romania is by far the biggest problem, we see the same trend in the rest of EU. Only 4 countries in EU are now above 95% when it comes to coverage, 2 doses. Hungary, congratulations, Andras, Hungary is at 99%. But it's mandatory, I believe, in Hungary, and people do comply somehow. Iceland is good as well, 98%, Cyprus 97%, Portugal 96%. But those are the only 4 countries in EU where you're above 95%. This is as of 2024, when we have the latest statistics. All other countries are below 95%, even, I must say, my native Sweden, who has gone from a healthy 97% in 2019 to only 92% now in 2024. In Sweden, my country, supposedly a rational country. I was raised to believe that we believed in science here, but I guess the pandemic has refueled a lot of the vaccine skepticism. I'm not quite sure why it should have, but it seems to be the case. Also, some of the vaccination programs were stopped or temporarily halted during the pandemic because we had to prioritize, I say we, but one had to prioritize the vaccination against COVID-19.
Yeah, I believe that hit Romania very hard as well. the need for triaging, and we can see the result of that, unfortunately. Yeah. So let's turn to Austria, where a medical doctor in Carinthia has appeared before the Klagenfurt Regional Court, facing charges of gross negligence causing death and endangering physical safety. So the prosecution centers on the death of a 14-year-old girl suffering from cancer. The doctor in question allegedly convinced the girl's family to abandon conventional treatment in favor of intravenous infusions of cat's claw, which is a herb. Plant. It's an herb called Uncaria tomentosa.
He hadn't heard about garlic oil then.
No, exactly. Yeah. So, I don't think it would have made a difference, though.
No, probably not.
So, cat's claw is basically a tropical woody vine, and he was promising that the plant extract would cure her. Sadly, the teenager passed away, and her parents have already faced their own legal proceedings regarding her care because of abandoning conventional treatment, of course. The case expanded significantly after the widow of another former patient, a local tattoo artist, came forward. She alleges her husband also died after receiving cat's claw infusions, which the prosecution links to a fatal heart and brain infection. So this isn't just about two tragic cases. The indictment reveals a staggering scale of potential harm here. Between 2007 and 2025, the doctor is alleged to have endangered the lives of at least 6,550 people in some way. He reportedly administered substances intravenously that were only legally authorized as food supplements, not medical injections. The prosecution argues these infusions pose an extremely high risk of microbial contamination, life-threatening allergic reactions, anaphylaxis, and fatal blood vessel blockages like embolisms. This is just unbelievable to me, how one person can do so much harm, and how many of these can be out there hidden from the sight of skeptics that we just don't know about. And it's like an underground movement that people who are prone to this will know about, but not necessarily those who are critical about them. So it's something that we need to actively seek out and reveal to the world that this is happening.
A lot of quackery this week.
Yeah.
Snake oil. Okay. Well, somehow related to snake oil, or at least medical fraud, I would call it. There's a multi-million-pound industry in the UK that has sprung up, promising that it can detect sensitivities to certain ingredients with a simple remote finger prick test. So this is more sciencey sounding than garlic oil, but the results you get back from these finger pricks blood tests are misleading very often and can even be dangerous. The business is getting bigger. The market of these at-home food sensitivity tests were valued at 2.6 million in 2025, and to all appearances, it is growing. So first, we have to go into a little bit medical things, and please help me if I get this wrong, Andras. I think you know more about biology than I do, but we should mention immunoglobulin E, IgE allergies, because this is a much bigger market, and it leads to a common misunderstanding that is exploited by sellers of the food sensitivity test. So IgE allergies happen when our immune cells misbehave and decide that a harmless substance is a threat. It can be dairy products or nuts or so, you know how that goes. And if that happens, the body has made a mistake and your blood will contain a type of antibody called IgE to whatever substance that was that triggered that. And that can trigger hay fever, dust mite allergies, food allergies, sneezing, coughing, rashes, swelling, vomiting, diarrhea, breathing difficulties, even potentially life-threatening anaphylaxis. So IgE blood tests can help doctors to work out what you're allergic to, but only alongside a detailed medical history and investigation. So this is about allergies, but food intolerances is something different. It doesn't involve the bit of the immune system that cause allergies. They happen when the body can't digest certain foods properly, so food intolerance systems mainly happen in the gut. The most common causes of food intolerances are gluten, lactose, dairy, sulfites. But just as with allergies, almost any food can cause an intolerance. So I mentioned the IgE test, but there is also something called IgG, immunoglobulin G tests. Yeah. And this is what people are now tricked into buying for home tests. Probably they're confusing the two, right? The most commonly purchased food intolerance test is a fingertip blood IgG test, which looks at the levels of IgG in your blood. But IgG has nothing to do with food intolerances or allergies. The British Dietetics Association says, quote, IgG are normal antibodies found in the body in response to infections, and the production of these antibodies are normal, and they are normal response to eating food. So we make IgG antibodies to every single food that we consume. And it's also what Wikipedia says on the matter. I needed to double check this. So Wikipedia says, and there are 3 citations to back up this quote. The quote is, testing of IgG is not indicated for diagnosis of allergy, and there's no evidence that it has any relationship to food intolerances, end quote. This is how one expert puts it in The Guardian. Quote, everybody who drinks a glass of milk is going to have an IgG antibody response because it's a foreign protein. People are shelling out $500 to say that their bodies are ingesting milk. Food allergy specialists hate them and have told me repeatedly off the record they are nothing more than expensive snake oil, end quote. So having an IgG response to anything in your bloodstream just shows you that you have what you have eaten recently. No need to buy expensive tests, and a positive result doesn't mean that you have a food sensitivity to that thing that you just ate. And of course, many of the companies that provide these products, they have a disclaimer written very small type on the packages saying that these tests do not claim to treat or cure, but it's misunderstood and people don't see it. So this is pushed a lot from so-called nutritional therapy lecturers, but it's also from the test providers themselves. They promote these tests, which do nothing. And some of the testing companies are giving therapists kickbacks of 10 to 20 pounds per test. So there's a lot of money, but don't buy this. This is nonsense. Doesn't work. Or it doesn't work. It doesn't show you what you think they show.
Yeah, all right. So instead of quackery and bogus products, I think we should use our function as an international hub for skeptics to promote something that happened in Belgium. Thanks to Josef for letting us know. This is exactly what we keep asking you for, dear listeners. If something is not on our radar necessarily, please enlighten us. Please let us know that it's happening. So, SKEPP, the Belgian Skeptical Organization, had just announced the winners of its annual awards for 2025. And I'm sorry, I will probably butcher all the names of the awards because it's all in Flemish, I believe. So my Flemish is a little bit rusty, so please bear with me. Please bear with me and don't hold me responsible for a bad pronunciation. So there is a prestigious award that translates as the Sixth Screw or the Sixth Sense. Zesdevies.
Probably not, but yes, let's go with that.
But it has been presented to the team behind the popular Nerdland podcast, led by science communicator Lieven Scheere. The award recognizes the panel's tireless efforts to make science accessible to a broad audience without dumbing it down. So that's a very huge effort, because that's always a dilemma, whether it's more important to communicate clearly and make it available to understand for everyone, or keeping the original content and trying to communicate it that way. So SKEPP praised the podcast for its humorous yet nuanced approach to scientific claims and its role in promoting critical literacy across Flanders and beyond. With over 300,000 monthly listeners, Nederland has proven that high-quality skeptical inquiry into science news can have massive mainstream appeal. So congratulations and good luck on keeping that up. But on the flip side, there is another award that they hand out, the notorious Skeptische Put, or the Skeptical Pit. It's an award no one wants to win. So that's something that is very similar to awards that are handed out by other organizations. And this was handed to KPNI, a clinical psychoneuroimmunology, which is an organization training and running therapy centers. SKEPP issued the award to criticize KPNI for what they describe as the systemic marketing of unproven medical claims. The organization was called out for using complex scientific sounding jargon to sell expensive courses and supplements without solid clinical backing. SKEPP warned that their approach often masks real medical issues with vague diagnoses and quote-unquote energetical imbalances. So I think we all know the type that tries to use complex scientific sounding jargon and not actually saying anything or not meaningful or useful. Wietse Wiels, the chairman of SKEPP, presented the awards during a live recording of the Nederland podcast at the Arenberg Theatre, and he highlighted the stark contrast between those who clarify science and those who exploit it for profit. Yeah, this is my understanding of the reporting, because it was all in Flemish, so I had to extensively use online translating applications. So if I got something wrong, please, Josef, or anyone else from Flanders or other parts of Belgium, please let us know. And we will issue a correction, I promise. All right, but that brings us to... Oh, and of course, please, dear listeners, do the same thing that Josef did. We want to know about stuff. If you can explain it to us in English when you let us know about the event, that is a good way of trying to avoid any misunderstandings. But it's not necessarily the only way to go about it. So just let us know that things are happening at your area. All right, but that brings us to the end of the news round, which means that we are about to find out who's been really wrong lately.
Yes, and I have to go again into biology, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable. That's not what I'm an expert in, but hopefully I will get this right. Anders, you're here to correct me if I say something stupid. But I think the gist of the thing is more important than the actual biology. So my understanding is that peptides are short chains of amino acids, just like proteins are, but proteins are much larger. Peptides are very common. There are over 7,000 known types of naturally occurring peptides in the human body, and they have different functions. They can act as signaling molecules, as hormones and neurotransmitters. Insulin, for instance, is a peptide hormone. So let's leave that. That's as far as I go into the biology. Because that's only part of this story. For some reason, peptides of all sorts have become very popular with people for a number of reasons. They are said to be possible miracle cures, and the market for illegal peptides on the internet is billions of dollars, mostly sold over social media, TikTok. There are influencers who inject themselves on camera with all kinds of peptides for many reasons. It's mostly popular in fitness and biohacking circles. They are said to boost muscle growth and boost metabolism. They're also claimed to help you get a tan, and you can get thicker hair and, basically everything you can imagine. Very strongly linked to the trend of looks maxing, which is why when you try to do all kinds of things to your body to quote-unquote maximize the way you look. But obviously there are many problems with this. Many of these peptides can produce side effects and be outright dangerous. There are concerns that some of them may increase the risk of cancer, but in a long term. Also, a lot of the time there is no science at all behind the claims, or perhaps the claims are exaggerated or misunderstood. In addition to that, any injection is risky. If you're not careful, you shouldn't inject yourself at home. If you don't know what you're doing, you have to keep your needles clean. Doses need to be very carefully measured and other things like that. Even worse is that, as always, when you buy things illegally online, you're not sure that you get what you think you're buying. There are contaminations, the concentration of the thing can be very different than it says on the package. It may be something totally different as well. So a very cynical industry has sprung up around this. In the US, it is currently legal to sell these products. And there are thousands of influencers there who collaborate with various companies. The products are often ordered from labs in China and sold at a very high price. So, of course, there's also a financial aspect here, wasting your money on potentially dangerous and ineffective substances. So, don't want to labor the point. You get what I'm saying. Illegal sales of peptides get this week's award for being really wrong.
Yeah, it's yet another example of how if something sounds very sciencey, then it's a selling point. And, well, mentioning peptides, it sounds very, very close to science, right? It's biology, come on. Yeah. And I know what I'm talking about. No, they don't necessarily do. And especially, as you mentioned, a lot of things can go wrong with this. So don't just fall for it. Okay, thank you very much for that, Pontus. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode, which is always marked by a quote. And this week, I'd like to share a quote from Jean-Louis Rodolphe Agassiz. I've already mentioned him, I think, several times. We've featured a couple of quotes from him as well. He was a Swiss-born American biologist and geologist and widely considered the father of glaciology.
The science of making ice cream, I guess.
Yes, it is. Yes. Or at least having something to do with ice.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Anyhow, the quote is... Every great scientific truth goes through 3 stages. First, people say it conflicts with the Bible. Next, they say it has been discovered before. Lastly, they say they always believed it.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just human nature, isn't it?
I guess.
Yeah. All right. But that really concludes this week's episode. Please get in touch. Please let us know what you think. Like and share and subscribe if you haven't yet. There are all kinds of ways you can support us, including going on Patreon and leaving us a couple of euros or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's at patreon.com/TheESP.
Mm-hmm. But we will be back next week. I'd like to thank you, Pontus.
Thanks a lot.
Many, many thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so. And until next week, goodbye.
Hej då!
Vi start. This has been your ESP experience. The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social. Like us on Facebook or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others.
I don't know how you can believe.
Religious residents in residents of Glastonbury.
So
yes.
He has been officially struck off the magical register. Magical.
Yes, imagine that.
Well, he should. Yeah, he should probably be registered as a magical, as a magician. No. Sorry, I don't want to offend any magicians. Magicians are great. So